Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. Apparently I still have the giggles a bit from my last take. So I've completely lost count of how many times I've tried to refilm this because every time I go to explain one thing and then I just spend several minutes blah 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 about completely irrelevant nonsense when I'm supposed to be giving you a writing update. That is my aim for this video. But because I haven't done a writing update or actually talked about my writing very much at all, it seems like I need to tell you what I'm actually writing. And apparently this is where the crazy tangent comes in, so we're going to focus this time. Focusing. For the last many years, like 21 years, I have been working on a historical fantasy featuring vampires. Now, before anyone asks, no, they do not sparkle. I have been working on it for so long because I came up with it when I was a teenager. Obviously, between then and now I have grown and changed, and many of my interests have changed, and what I find interesting in a story and my focus has all shifted. And so I've ended up rewriting and making big changes to the emphasis of the story to accommodate, even though the overarching intent of the story hasn't changed, and the protagonist and antagonist are exactly the same characters. But I did manage to complete a draft 5 years ago, I guess, and I did get it to the beta reader stage. But there I started realizing that I had some big problems with the story, and ultimately what it all simmered down to was the fact that I was trying to write an incredibly complicated, multi-leveled, big story as my first novel. While I was struggling to try and get this fantasy thing to work, I was also writing a serial that was just general fiction, and I was posting a chapter or two a month. Originally it was every week, but it became every month as the time went by. This serial was inspired by my experiences walking the Camino de Santiago. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the Camino de Santiago is one of many different hiking trails that go through Spain and terminate in Santiago de Compostela. You can also start in other parts of Europe, but wherever you start, you always finish at the church. And as long as you've walked 100 kilometers, you receive a certificate of completion, or a Compostela, and if you're Catholic you would then go to Mass at the church and your sins would be forgiven. The Camino was actually taken over from pagans, as all fun traditions are. The pagans used to walk from wherever they lived, hence why there are multiple trails, and they would walk to the coast of Spain where they thought the world ended. So you'd walk from home to the end of the world, and then you'd burn all your clothes, presumably put different ones on, and then you'd go home. And this was like a rebirth thing. So I've walked the Camino twice. Both times I started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is in the very south of France, went up and over the Pyrenees and across northern Spain, which is about 775 kilometers, at least officially. So the serial that I was working on was inspired by the events of my first Camino, and then as I was writing it I went into the Camino again, came back, and then I was using sort of seasonings of my experience of my second Camino to sort of bulk out and help the story of the first one. But basically the story was my first Camino experience. I had also taken myself out of it and kind of thrown myself away and populated the story with a fictional main character who had a fictional family. I did this because I needed the character to have a nice little character arc and resolutions and things which actual people don't have. So I gave her different baggage than me, and I gave her something to learn and all that kind of thing that you want in a story. So she needed to be fictional. And to build in her fictional baggage, I also needed her family to be different from my own. So I threw out my family, fictional family, but the plot is fairly true to life. That's what I had already been working on for the last few years whilst I was struggling with the fantasy thing. But then last year in around May, I was just getting to this, I was getting to a really bad place with my fantasy book. Like, I just wasn't making the progress that I wanted to make with it. I couldn't seem to make my critique partners understand what I was trying to say, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was, and I was going insane a little bit. So I decided ultimately to put that on hiatus and to take the serial that I was posting online, take it down, delete the delete the blog, and reshape it into a novel. What I've been doing for the last year is trying to A, write the second half of the book, and B, edit down the first part. But I've done it. I very recently, like just a couple of weeks ago, actually wrote the final chapter. It's done, but it's also really long. I started with 130,000 plus words, edited it down to 80 and with getting rid of extra bulk from that first half, but in writing the second half I had got it back up to I think around 100 and over 110, whatever it was. So I've been editing, oh my god, editing, and I have just hit 100,000. I actually want to keep it between 80 and 90,000, so I've still got quite a bit to cut. So that's what I've been working on. It is a slow process. I'm hoping that I can get all of this done and actually kind of have a completed thing. I don't know what draft I would really name this at this point. Like, I feel like it's not the first draft anymore, but maybe it is the first draft. Numbering seems unhelpful, but I want to get to a point where it's, you know, nothing's highlighted as this needs fixing, and it's down to my target word count by the end of October. That is a completely arbitrary date, but I would like to do NaNoWriMo this year, and I don't want to start a new project while I'm editing this one. I could, I very much could, but I think that I need, for me right now, I just want to focus on getting it finished. But I have an idea for a new book that I would like to try in NaNoWriMo. That may be overly optimistic given that November is also a really busy time for me at work, so that story may have to wait for next year. I think that's pretty much everything that I've done and am planning to do in the short term, so I might get back to it. If you enjoyed this video, click various buttons and things, and I will be back next week. Bye! I'm of course very prepared to believe that I just did a shit job explaining it.